What happened in episode 6 of season 2 of House of the Dragon? How does it compare to the books, and what does it mean for the rest of the season? Hi everyone, this is Robert. Welcome to In Deep Geek. We're covering House of the Dragon in full on this channel, as well as the wider world of Ice and Fire, and The Lord of the Rings and The Witcher too. Welcome. And this is your spoiler warning, both for what happens in this episode and what happens next in the books. We open with that Lannister army we've heard so much about. They've finally started marching and reached the Golden Tooth, which is a castle right at the edge of their lands. But that's where they are stopping for now. Lord Jason Lannister has no wish to attack Harrenhal, where everyone knows Daemon and Caraxes are, without a dragon to protect them. It's understandable, but new Prince Regent Aemond has only one dragon to play with. Sunfire is lying incapacitated outside Rook's Rest, Helena doesn't seem likely to be riding Dreamfire into battle anytime soon, and as we are told a few times in this episode, Daeron, their younger brother, is still down in Old Town with his dragon, and it's all gone a bit quiet from them. I mean, we get a brief update. Daeron is now 16 and seems to be growing into a good young man, more caring than Aegon and Aemond, definitely, and there is some fighting in the Reach, but Otto is not replying. Aemond, meanwhile, is busy prowling around the council chamber and sending people away, trying to create the kind of small council that he wants. He sends Tyland to get an alliance with the Triarchy. In the book, Otto did that before he left, but I imagine the outcome will be the same. He sends Criston Cole to lead his army to Harrenhal. Criston clearly also wants a dragon, but Aemond will simply say that he will join when the time is right. He also relieves Alicent of her seat. She descends into greater introspection. Expect to see this continue next episode. Keep an eye also on the dynamic here between Aemond and Larys. Larys seems to make a soft pitch to be the new hand of the Prince Regent and gets slapped down by Aemond, so then visits Aegon and has a bit of a heart-to-heart with him. He was born with a disability, so people underestimate him. Now Aegon will similarly be underestimated, he says. Aegon is clearly clinging to anyone who might offer him help, but we're left to still wonder what game Larys is playing. Because Aemond also has a potential problem here with Aegon. Aegon is technically still king. If he tells people that Aemond seized power by deliberately aiming Vhagar's flames right at him, that might be an issue. Aemond deals with it through a bit of intimidation and a thinly veiled order to Grandmaster Orwyle to keep Aegon well sedated for a long time. Meanwhile, out in the city, we see Mysaria's plans start to unfold. Remember last time she came up with the idea that there is more than one way to fight a war, and Alinda Massey, Rhaenyra's lady-in-waiting, was dispatched to King's Landing on a secret mission. The idea becomes clear now. Mysaria's friends and allies start spreading discontent among the small folk about Team Green feasting and dancing in the Red Keep, while the small folk have so little. And seriously, the food shortage does seem to be starting to bite. They follow this up by providing food shipments, very, very clearly from Rhaenyra, and suddenly she is the one the small folk are cheering for while rioting against Team Green. Yes, it's good that the small folk of King's Landing are getting fresh food, but the motivation here seems to be about propaganda. A few episodes ago, the small folk were shouting out, "Rhaenyra the Monstrous." One can't help but think that at some point soon, the small folk will realise how they're being treated by all the Targaryens, but for now Rhaenyra is their saviour. The PR offensive is effective, and surely lays the groundwork for Team Black to swoop in some point soon. The army has been ordered out of King's Landing, so it's really just Vhagar in the way now. Over in Harrenhal, Daemon is still getting his visions, but each time they seem to be getting closer to hitting home. This time we have Viserys accusing him of caring more about his place as heir than the pain his own brother was going through. Viserys needs him, but Daemon is banished and tries desperately to leave the room in which his brother is weeping. Again and again we get the message. When things get tough or go against him, Daemon just leaves. Dream Rhaenyra accuses him of that. Dream Laena asks if he's been looking after their daughters. He hasn't. Now Viserys says that when he lost his wife and baby, Daemon abandoned him too. This time, though, He can't leave. The doors are locked. He is forced to listen to his brother's tears. Then, later, he does comfort him. These dream sequences, therefore, aren't just random acid trips. This is Daemon being confronted with some of his deepest character flaws. He always runs away when he doesn't get what he wants, abandoning his responsibilities and those he cares about. And he never asks for help. It's always just about him. Who is responsible for these dreams that force Daemon into a better place? Well, Alice Rivers confronts him when he is about to run away once again. He eventually asks her for help. "Give it 3 days," she says. And then we hear that old Grover Tully has died, after Alice had treated him, apparently, freeing up the political logjam in the Riverlands. I'm sure Daemon will need to scapegoat Willem Blackwood for the atrocities that happened last episode, but the route to him getting his army is finally open. So expect from next episode Daemon to be more at one with himself, and also a step closer to finally getting that army. In other words, the personal growth and justificatory army that he needs to return to Rhaenyra's side. Which is all well and good, but Rhaenyra has not exactly been standing still and simpering, waiting for him to return. She's basically written off help from him, and is proceeding on the basis that he is now gone from her life. In particular, she seems to be shifting to a more assertive approach to the war. Last episode, we saw her reading a book about Visenya, the warrior queen. This time, she slaps Lord Celtigar and says that it is her own fault that he had forgotten to fear her, and picks up a sword, and actively debates with Jace about whether she should lead an attack on Dragonback. She's also moving on romantically or sexually from Daemon, with Mysaria. So it's worth noting where the character arcs for Daemon and Rhaenyra have gone this season. Daemon started out running away from his responsibilities and Rhaenyra as a loner, and is now perhaps turning back to her. He's certainly coming to terms with who he is, but Rhaenyra has been living with his absence and is moving in the opposite direction, in the war effort and personally. Interestingly, Emma Darcy, who plays Rhaenyra, talks about what happens with Steffon Darklyn, more about him in a moment, as being an act of fanaticism that we start to see Rhaenyra exhibit, so keep an eye on that. Anyway, Daemon may or may not be moving back towards Rhaenyra, but Rhaenyra is definitely moving away from Daemon. Will they find some middle ground when they meet, or are they now moving in irrevocably different directions? So let's move on to the dragon bonding part of this episode. Rhaenyra and Jace agreed last time that they would try to find some nobles with Targaryen ancestry to ride Vermithor and Silverwing, two of the unclaimed dragons in Dragonstone, and they discover that Sir Steffon Darklyn, Lord Commander of Rhaenyra's Kingsguard, actually has a reasonable, if rather distant, claim. His grandmother's grandmother, named Arianna, was born a Targaryen princess, and presumably married into the Darklyn family, which, if you'll forgive the nerdy digression, is completely new information about the Targaryens. So let's try to briefly figure out where she fits into the Targaryen family tree. This isn't an exact science, and Steffon Darklyn is aged down a bit in the show, but let's say that he's roughly Viserys and Daemon's generation. So Steffon's grandmother's grandmother would be about the generation of Viserys's great-great-grandparents, which is Aegon the Conqueror and his sister wives, or perhaps the generation above or below them. We have no record of any Targaryen called Arianna then, or at any other place in the Targaryen family tree. Did Aegon actually have 3 sisters, or is this his previously unknown aunt? Geeks like me need to know. Anyway, Steffon Darklyn is set up to bond with Sea Smoke, which again raises questions, because there is a big lore issue here. As far as we're aware, a dragon can only ever bond with one rider at a time. In the book, Laenor, Sea Smoke's previous rider, is dead, so there's no issue here, but on the show, Rhaenyra knows that he lives and still offers up Sea Smoke for bonding. We're forced to conclude that she doesn't think this is an issue, so perhaps we shouldn't, unless she knows Laenor is dead. Again, I think we need a bit of clarification here. Regardless, Stefan Darklyn tries to bond with Seasmoke, and Seasmoke is having none of it, burning him and flying off, clearly not wanting to be forced to bond with any random people, and instead seemingly hunts down Adam of Hull, who we know is Corlys's son, so Laenor's half-brother, and with at least some Valyrian ancestry. We've heard before about dragons choosing their riders, but this is by a long way the clearest example of it. Which brings us to the other dragon on the loose. Rhaena finds evidence of a large wild dragon living in the Vale. Given that she has been set up to be frustrated that she doesn't have a dragon to ride and has been given what she considers a menial task to do, I think we can guess where that might be heading as well. At which point, we should probably address the elephant, or greater bearded writer, in the room. Last week, not exactly coincidentally, George R. R. Martin did a whole blog post about dragon lore, with lots of information about how they bond with humans and how far they range from their homes and so on. Given the timing, it's pretty clear that this was a reaction in advance to what we see in this episode. On his blog, he stated very clearly that his dragons do not range away from home unless ridden there. They like to stay in their lairs and nests and not go far. Otherwise, he argues, what we saw on the show with Seasmoke and the mystery dragon in the Vale would have always been happening throughout the Targaryens' time in Westeros. The continent would be filled with dragons who went roaming looking for food or whatever. And further back in time, the same would have happened in Valyria before the Doom. So the Doom of Valyria wouldn't have killed all the dragons. They would have been spread across the continent and avoided it. History would have been very, very different if dragons liked to roam. He concludes by saying that if you ignore canon, the world you've created comes apart like tissue paper. His words, and strong words. So I think we need to acknowledge that this episode is a big departure from book canon, and what George R. R. Martin might have wanted. The butterfly effects of all this will probably be quite significant as the show progresses. What else? Prince Reggio of Pentos has written to say that he'd be happy to shelter the 3 youngest members of Team Black and Rhaena. That was Rhaenyra's original plan, after all. We're left to wonder if Rhaena will really leave that dragon there in the Vale and head off to safety. I suspect not. We've already spoken about Adam of Hull, but we also get confirmation that Alan, his older brother's bald head, is to hide the fact that he actually has Valyrian silver hair. It appears that this is a bit of an open secret in the shipyards of Driftmark. I wonder where he got that hair colouring from. And now, with his wife Rhaenys dead, though she may have understood, Corlys is promoting Alan, one tiny step closer to acknowledging him. Ulf White is told very clearly about how Rhaenyra should be queen, which we know he already believes or has said publicly, and we see another side to Hugh Hammer, who it seems is very willing to punch a complete stranger and take their food in order to feed his own family. We already know that he loves his family, but this shows a ruthless side that wasn't apparent before. But overall, we have to acknowledge that we have just 2 episodes to go in this season, and so the end game is becoming clear. In Harrenhal, Daemon is conquering his personal demons, and the route to him gathering an army is becoming clear. On Dragonstone, Rhaenyra is starting to embrace the idea that she must go on the offensive, and in King's Landing, Aemond is alienating his potential allies while the small folk are turning against Team Green. The Dance of the Dragons is surely about to take another decisive turn. But what do you think about all the lore changes in this episode? Let me know in the comments below. If you'd like to see more videos diving deep into George R. R. Martin's world of Ice and Fire, there's a playlist appearing now on the left of your screen. Or to support this channel, thank you. There's a link to my Patreon page on the right of your screen. That's all for this time. Thanks for watching. I'll see you again soon.